Got it.
Hello everyone, good evening. It is Simon Misiewicz here and we are part of the Property Experts panel and we have got lots of questions for you, but the date is, as I need to remind myself, is Monday the 7th of February 2022. I don't know how many people are still getting on my emails saying 2021, so I shall apologise if you have received my email recently saying that year. Welcome everyone. What I'm going to do straight off the bat is get every panel member to introduce themselves. So hopefully I can do that. And with the power of technology that failed me abysmally last month, I'm hoping that I won't have that same issue this month. So I'm going to move my phone and here we are. So it is the 7th of February 2022. And what I've done for everyone watching for lives, if you're on YouTube, that is, the description is on YouTube. So if you want this checklist that tells you what to buy, how to buy it, do your due diligence, make sure that you use the right tax structure, make sure you understand all about law and buy-to-let mortgages, and indeed educate yourself, then this checklist must be the best thing for you whilst you're watching this show, and download it. If you do want this checklist, which I really think you should get, it is free after all, then just go onto the description box of this video and press the download button, and then that will give you this spreadsheet. So that's that. I am indeed Simon Misiewicz from Optimize Accountants. I'm a property and expert tax advisor. So if you are looking to buy properties, whether it's the UK, Spain, Hong Kong, or indeed the US, then I can certainly help you. And that's pretty much it for me. So I'm going to move over to the lovely Teresa. So Teresa, good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to all. I'm glad to be here again this evening. Yes, my name is Teresa Kaczmarek and I'm here representing the National Residential Landlord Association. So yeah, I am poised and ready for any questions about landlording.
Wonderful.
Tim.
You're on mute, Tim.
I know, I'm no longer on mute. As I said before, my wife would love to have a mute button, but sadly she doesn't. But anyway, hello everyone. Now I've remembered to unmute myself. I'm Tim.Bishop from Bronwen. We're solicitors, as you can see, who really understand property investors. So we have a specialist property investor team. I'm also an investor and developer myself with experience of commercial conversion, service accommodation, HMO, and I'm currently setting up a family SaaS just about to buy a property into, and also buying another B&B to put in as service accommodation. So it's Tim.Bishop, solicitors who really understand property investors. And as always, if you've got any questions, we're always happy to provide free initial phone advice to property investors.
Ross.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ross Maynard. I've been in construction all of my working life, which is now over 35 years. I'm an investor, a landlord, and of course, I'm a developer. During the day, I run a maintenance and refurbishment company that's focused specifically on investors and landlords. I've just launched a bit of a training course, which will hopefully help some of you to understand what to look at when you go and look at buildings. Get in touch on any of the above, or Facebook and Instagram.
Simon.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm from Funded. We are a buy-to-let, or a specialist buy-to-let brokerage, helping you find the best products for your projects. Specifically, I come from 20 years worth of property investing background. I've tried every strategy, etc., and I classically started out broking, trying to tell the broker that I had found before I was a broker myself what to do, and realized that general brokers don't understand investors. So hopefully, if you need some specialist finance, I can help.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much. And Bronwen.
Last but not least, hi everybody, I'm Bronwen Vearncombe. I'm a property investor in Hampshire. I invest in HMOs, guest houses, serviced accommodation, so holiday lets, and development. I also have a SaaS pension. And most importantly is this, as the expert panel, is I love to help other people learn. So come and find me on social media. I have an online program. I also have a #1 best-selling book. So look me up. I will talk about it, no doubt, as the questions go through. And in fact, today we have a record number of people who've registered. It's a huge amount, and we've probably got about 40 questions asked as well in advance. So we're going to just not faff about today. We're going to go straight into the questions, I think, Simon, aren't we? We're going to try and use as much of this hour and a half as we can to help you.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you ever so much. And I think it is important to know that we are cutting down on some of the slides, as Bronwen has said. But in the bottom of the video description, there are a bunch of links to all of the members here. So if you're wondering how to contact us, then do go through that. And I'm sure that we'll be sending links during this video session as well. If we think there's something useful to send to you, then we'll do that as well. But as we said, this is a live show, so we've got some pre-populated questions. But because you're live, then I'd like to kind of understand what questions you have as well. So if you're watching this live, say hi, press that like button. If you feel this show is going to be giving you some value add, then please do press that like button. Please don't be nervous and shy about it. Okay, so let's kick off, and you'll see the kind of questions we'll get. And this is diving straight in here. Ginny asks, have you heard about this smart company structure? I.e., apparently it can include a discretionary trust, which can reduce inheritance tax. We are thinking about doing this as our limited company, but not sure what the pros and cons are. So would appreciate any advice on this. And to be honest, we work with a company called Property 118, and we also work with Cornerstone Tax. Both of them do this kind of thing. And yes, indeed, you can use something. A smart company is more of a Mark Alexander, if you're watching this, I know that you've used this terminology for brilliant marketing purposes. So well done to you, Mark. But there isn't anything really, if considered from a smart company, but a company structure has a mixture of shares. Ordinary shares, growth shares, freezer shares, you name it. There's a bunch of stuff. What I would say to anyone watching this is please, if you're watching on a forum like this, probably don't take too much notice of it other than getting your own advice on it. It's a huge transaction for you to take part of. Yes, we've heard of them. Smart companies are very good. They can't reduce your current inheritance tax, but what they can do is stop the bath water coming into the tub and sinking your boat even further. So the idea behind it is whatever water's in your boat, you can't do too much about that, but at least you can plug the boat in and stop you sinking further. So hopefully that's giving you some indication of what you can do. Let's stroll on, because I think our panel members are keen as mustard they're at the traps almost like greyhounds racing at the bunny there. This is, by the way, if you're RSPCA, please don't sue me for that kind of comment. So it's a bunny rabbit, that is a megaphone. So Sophie's asked, do we know whether there is a statistic, can't even get my teeth in, that is 1 in 3 purchases fell through? How can we find out? I'm not sure, Sophie, if it really matters if 1 in 3 properties have been going out that way, because it's more to do with what your deal is, and some of those stats doesn't make too much sense to you or shouldn't matter too much. But from your side, Tim, what kind of deals are falling out? And let's inform Sophie why there might be 1 in 3 rather than making her worry about her own deals.
I did have a word with one of my guys, the head of my conveyance team, and I think our figures are about 1 in 4 at the moment. So again, quite a high figure. And it's surprising, really. I guess there are a number of reasons. Sometimes mortgages don't go through. Sometimes people get gazumped. Gazumping has come a bit. For those of you who aren't as ancient as me, gazumping is when you agree a sale with someone, but somebody else comes in with a bigger price and the vendor accepts the bigger price. As I think from gazundering, which is the other way around, which is rare, but did happen in the past. So I think that's come out ahead. The technical issues, sometimes people simply give up. I had a property that I was waiting for 7 months to exchange, and eventually they simply decided not to sell. There were problems in the chain down the line. Chains are always a problem. There's no question things are going slower these days. So perhaps once at a time, the average residential conveyance without any difficulty will be 3 months. It's probably not 4.5 now. So I think a lot of institutions are going slowly. Some solicitors are going slowly. Some people are going slowly. And the slower it goes, the more chance I think are that things will drop out.
Very interesting. Is there, Bronwen, have you seen that from any of your mentees that go on to your property education? Are they seeing the kind of same issues?
Well, I'm seeing it myself. I'm doing some mortgages, and my goodness, is it slow? And Tim knows that because I talked to him. Simon, Simon, very well, Simon Hodgson. That solicitors, mortgage company solicitors are taking forever. So I think I'm lucky with some of ours where the owner, it's empty, so the owner's being patient. But I can tell you now that if that owner was living there, they would have just given up by now. They would have found another buyer. So mortgage companies are being really slow. In terms of 1 in 4, that makes sense, I think, to me. There are people that perhaps over offer. So they're offering more because the market is really buoyant and, there's sort of bit of a frenzy. So people are offering more than the value of the property itself. So when they come to get the mortgage, the valuation sometimes doesn't stag. And they go, oh, actually, I can't get a mortgage because I'm paying too much. So, I think the big thing around when there are fall throughs is to keep in touch with the agent so that when these things happen, if you like that property and someone's beaten you to it, make sure that you stay in touch. Is it still going through? Is it still going through? Because you will be able to pick it up quickly if you keep in touch with that agent so that when it falls through, you're ready to step in. Okay, that's the key.
Can I just come back on one point? It's very obvious, and it's probably the old adage, but basically any chain is only ever as slow as the slowest party, or as fast as the slowest party. So you only really need one part of the chain. And when I'm saying part of the chain, I don't just mean vendors or purchasers. I mean vendors, purchasers, lenders, searches, the list just goes on. And if there's just one of them who's going slow, perhaps they've taken on too much work, or they've downsized, or they're not sorted out, some more government organisations still seem to struggle working from home. Just one of those cuts in and suddenly everything slows down. However good your solicitor, your estate agent, your accountant, your funding broker is, if there's one person who's going to delay the chain, I'm afraid you tend to have to go at their speed.
Interesting. Good answers there, guys. And let's go to the next question. Talking about, James is asking here, how can I find out details of an existing planning permission, e.g. commercial, B&B, sui generis? Is there a portal I can go to? So I think people may be doing lots of planning or selling properties with planning, and people might want to know about that. So how can anyone find that out? Tim, Simon, over to you on that one, or even Ross.
Well, okay.
I love this kind of good question. Yeah, that's
absolutely. Simon, you caught me completely off guard there. I was waiting for a tax question and to fire it straight back to yourself. Unfortunately, it didn't work. Yeah, in fact, actually, you took a tax question straight out the blocks just to get it out of the way.
Fired it out, Usain Bolt style. Usain Bolt.
Absolutely.
As in retired.
Okay, so your local council planning portal would be the first port of call, really, to check. Check the planning status, whether there's any pending planning applications gone in, etc., etc. That's where I would suggest you start.
You can talk to a planning consultant, a local planning consultant who can go find out for you. They've got loads of knowledge. This is not council ones, but private ones.
Good point. Okay, let's go to another question then. Max is asked.
Ross has got his hand up.
Ross, I didn't mean to ignore you. You haven't got your red jacket on there. I was thinking
I've taken it off. It's too hot. I was just going to add that planning is incredibly slow as well. We're talking about all the solicitors and everything else being slow. Certainly down here on the south coast, they're 6 months behind as a minimum. I've been looking at a property for over 10 months. You meant to get a meeting within 3. No chance, or 9 months in before we got that meeting. So it's all very slow.
Wow. Okay, that's not particularly good, is it? So let's go over to the Max has asked a question. Is there any other conditions for green mortgages, such as minimum property value and property type? Can I use green mortgage for a HMO or block or apartment? What is the typical interest rate that's available? Simon, back to you.
Brilliant question. Okay, so obviously an EPC of C or better is what you need to access a green mortgage. They're available for multi-unit freehold blocks of flats, HMOs, and single lets. There was another part to the question, Simon, which I escaped.
It was the rates and the type of property.
Yeah, rates. Okay, so rates. Obviously, there's a discount for rates. So The best 2-year product at the moment, which is non-EPC specific, currently is at 2.59. But if you're looking at specific HMO EPC product, I think it's 2.94 off the top of my head is the best at the moment. And that is a 0.1% discount off the non-HMO product. So yeah, you get a discount. Worth having for sure.
There you go. I think we're doing well on these kind of questions so far, guys. Well done to us all. Ken has asked, is there a tax credit? Oh, no, that's it. It's game over straight away. Someone's asked a tax question and I said it was going well. I've just, that's not gone well at all after all that. I've just noticed on my screen, it's all...
Ask you the question. How about we do that?
Well, let's go for that anyway.
Ask you the tax question.
Yeah. Is there a tax credit allowed on the personal mortgage interest costs of remortgaging funds if the funds are withdrawn from the investment for pension income requirements? I believe this is not the Section 24 issue, but more of a redeployment of funds. Just on that, I mean, if you take a mortgage out of your property, without being too technical here, but up to the level of your property purchase value, then you can use that to buy anything. You could buy that to have a boat or a car for yourself, and that's absolutely fine. You can still use that mortgage interest up to your original purchase price and offset that against your rental income. Where it can be a bit tricky is whereby you have a situation where you refinance the property, it's gone over. So let's say your original purchase price was 100,000, it's gone up to 200,000. Once you have a mortgage, let's say of 150,000, you have to use that for property investments, because if you don't, you're not allowed to use that mortgage interest against your property income. So that's the only thing that I would suggest that you be careful of, really. But apart from that, no, everything else is fine. Susie, it's us. I've inherited some money. Is it best for me to buy a flat with cash or a house with a mortgage? Interesting. Bronwen, what's your views on that one?
That's a great question. You know, when you're starting out, it's actually a bit of a dilemma, you know, but given that things are taking a long time to get done, you know, being a cash buyer can be really advantageous sometimes because you can negotiate really well. However, you know, once you've bought with cash, you could then maybe add value, make it, you know, put new kitchens, bathrooms, whatever, get that value as high as you can. And then you go to Simon and you say, hey, you know, can I mortgage this? So you can do it in stages. My opinion is if you can leverage mortgages, then your money goes further. So if you can use the value of mortgages, interest rates are still low. I know they've doubled. They're still very low. So you've got to make the most of that so that you can maybe buy several properties with the money that you've got rather than just one. And then that's lots of assets. So that's the way I would go. Any other views in the team?
I didn't put my hand up, Simon. I'm not sure I can talk unless I put my hand up. How's that? You're on mute, Simon, by the way. Oh, right. Well,
I am on mute. I was miming the fact that I was saying how professional the show was, and then I kept myself on mute, which was terribly unprofessional. So no, but please do go ahead and you go comment.
I mean, so yes, a really interesting question. So of course, I guess as investors, we all look at the property that you're going to buy, how much rent it's going to generate per year, and work that out as a percentage of the purchase price, which gives you your yield. So I guess you might tilt towards maybe a slightly higher yield. The flat might yield higher, but you would still potentially mortgage that, as Bronwen had suggested, to then leverage your deposit pot to maybe go and buy 2 flats. So let's say the flats yield, for argument's sake, at 6% and a family house yields at 5%. You've got an extra 1% yield against, let's say, 2 flats to the 1 house. So you've got a considerable amount of extra cash. Now, obviously, there are setup costs and you've got 2 lots of setup costs. So your return on investment takes a little bit longer to pay back, potentially, but that might be a way to look at it. And flats can be, might throw this to you, Tim, in terms of, you know, the difference between a flat and a house. A house is going to be freehold, a flat's going to be leasehold. Potentially, if you're new to it, buying a leasehold flat might be slightly more confusing than the standard freehold.
Yeah, if I can come in there. Basically, yes, I was going to mention that. The main difference between houses and flats is the way they're owned. Basically, houses are almost always sold on a freehold basis. In other words, you own the house, although there are a few exceptions. Flats in general are leasehold. In other words, you don't really own it in a sense. You simply have bought the right to live there for a number of years. And the real difference is the lease. Now, every lease change is different rather. If you're renting a short-term property and a short-held tenancy is broadly all the same, it's pretty standard. But if you're buying a flat, leases do vary hugely. So I think one of the questions is depends what you want to do with it. So, for example, some leases will say you can't sublet it. Some leases will say if you want to have an HMO, you can't have more than one family. Some leases will stop you having serviced accommodation. So I think the first thing is to decide what you want to do with it, because there are some restrictions with leasehold. Leasehold can be quite successful, however. But ultimately, to me, once you get over that question of whether you can actually do what you want to do with that particular property, it's all a question of figures. It's pounds, shillings and pence. So really, to me, I like looking at the return on the capital invested. So in other words, what kind of return you're going to get. And the other thing I like, and I know Bronwen's very keen on this, as some of the others, are added value. Straightforward buy-to-lets are okay, but if you can add value, in other words, HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, serviced accommodation, you can somehow improve it, all sorts of things, then obviously that makes it much more attractive. So I think it's down to pounds, shillings and pence first, and secondly, can you do what you want to under the lease?
To mention pound, shilling and pence is certainly showing your age. I think we have a new victim. Right, so Malcolm has asked the question now. With interest rates due to go up again, would the panel suggest I agree fixed rate refinancing at some point on my properties? That's a great question. It's something I often say to my clients is always keep an eye on the variable and fixed rates and the mortgage interest of Bank of England. Simon, you're closer to this detail than even I am. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, okay. I guess we would start by saying that this isn't individual advice. Okay, we're really talking over what would be a reasonable thing to do and seek independent advice relating to your particular circumstances. But in terms of mortgage interest costs at the moment, I'd say that 5-year products are not priced massively more than 2-year products. So given the fact that interest rates are looking to go up further than they've already gone, we can't guarantee that, but that certainly looks to be the way it's going to head. Potentially taking a longer fixed rate might make more sense. It would also make sense to try and find a lender if you're going to take a 5-year fixed rate that has the ability to do what's known as a further advance. So if you've locked yourself in for 5 years, you haven't locked in the ability to be able to get to increased growth equity. So let's say your property grows at let's say year 2 to 3, you can go back and effectively do a remortgage and top up to 75% of its new value without paying penalties on the 5-year fixed rate money that you've already done. So that's the key if you take a 5-year fix, I would suggest.
Can I come in on that? Again, as well as being clearly the old person referring to pounds, shillings and pence, just as well I didn't refer to sovereigns or farthings, which of course are my normal currency. As the group, if anybody's seen this before, no, I am the self-confessed nerd. I'm the guy who likes to read lots of boring things like The Economist and the Harvard Business Review. And so Simon obviously is very accurate in terms of what we're doing at the moment, but I love to take a big picture. And so just thought I'd let you know what the headline on the cover of this week's Economist was. It was basically how high will inflation go? Now this is talking about the world inflation, but I think it's very relevant in terms of the UK. And just 2 sentences, which are the headlines. It's number 1, interest rates may have to rise sharply to fight inflation. Shall I put the teeth back in? Interest rates may have to rise sharply to fight inflation, but the low rate era is unlikely to come to a permanent end. So I think in terms of taking a general, slightly more long-term, bigger picture, I think that probably more says what Simon says, that, probably long-term we're going to be okay, but there may be some rises in the short term.
Perfect. Bronwen, what's your views on, I know that Simon's talking about he has to do that in terms of the Financial Regulatory Authority, but from your perspective, are you thinking about using fixed rates? Are you happy with variable rates?
Well, we do fix our rates because it gives you certainty, and it's a very personal thing. I think everyone's risk profile is slightly different. Some people won't remortgage their own home, for example, because they're saying I don't want to I want to pay down my mortgage, and we're all different. we took as much out of our house as we could because we wanted that money to buy multiple properties. So you've got to think about it, discuss it as a family, whoever's involved, and understand what is your risk profile, what are you comfortable with, and fix those rates if you just want certainty and you don't want to have to worry about what everyone's saying in the press, and that you go, right, okay, let's do that. But talk to your broker. If your broker's also an investor like all of us here, they've got a view, they can help advise you, and they can show you the differences between the rates, and you make up your own mind. So yeah, personal thing, really. Did the NRLA give you anything, Teresa? Any advice do they give on things like the economy and stuff?
No.
Yes, there's a deep thinking process there.
I know it was. No, that's not true. I mean, we do give updates on the housing market. We do have a research section, so we spend quite a bit on research, and there's information there that people might find of interest on that.
But no, it's still the answer.
I tried to fluff it up a bit. I felt a bit guilty, but
it's not a pillow. You don't need to. It's fine. Ian has asked the question: as a first-time landlord, what risks do I face? Responsibilities, tenant laws, and insurance. Well, gazumping is one of your worries to have concerns over. But what other things do we need to worry about? And I go to Bronwen and Tim on this. Tim's not got by the way, audience, if you've not spotted Tim's flash, very sharp haircut, I have. So we'll be commenting about that shortly. But in the meantime, Bronwen, Tim, what's your thoughts on the risks for the first time landlord?
I also want to bring Teresa in so she can say more than no, because again, the national body of property investing is the NRLA, and they've got a huge amount of resources and things that cover this sort of thing. So I'm sure Teresa's probably got a view as well. I've forgotten what the question is now.
what risks do first time landlords have?
Well, the big thing about first-time landlords is you've got to understand what is property investing. You've got to have some education, some knowledge. You can watch YouTube if you want to. You can listen to social media, but you won't always get the right answers. So come and speak to me, speak to other people who offer training. Get some basic training under your belt, and then you can invest with confidence and understand what the risks are. So I'm not going to go through them all now, but I can certainly share if someone emails me, share a bit more information. But I'm sure Tim's got some views as well.
I think there are so many issues here, it's hard to know where to start really, and I think that's why it's very important, as Bronwen says, to have a team, have a power team, etc. Because there isn't just one person to go to for this. So for example, there are legal issues to start off with. You have to know what you can and can't do. There are things you can and can't do under your mortgage, which would depend on your particular circumstances. And then if you have to get to renting out property, there are plenty of stuff, whether it's building regulations or rental, or how to keep your tenants' money, those kind of things. So I think the danger is, there are so many things we can't really get started here, but make sure either you have a very thorough education across the board or find specialists who do it for you. I'll be honest with you, that's certainly what I do. I prefer not to get too much in detail in running the property, so I have agents that run the property, and they know exactly how to do HMOs, they know exactly how to do service, they understand the regulations, so I don't need to. I'll get a builder to do the building regs, so I don't have to. But if you want to do everything, then you're going to have to spend a lot of time because there are a lot of risks. And I think one thing I would say is the world is becoming more and more regulated. In the Western world, no regulator has ever been defunded. Regulators are increasing, and I think we'll see increase. Now all the British government are very keen on big government, all political parties are. We're going to see more and more regulation. So you have to be even more careful, because sometimes the consequences can be quite severe. Sometimes fines, disqualifications, and even sometimes prison for some things if you don't get it right.
Just out of interest, you said Western world. I felt like I was listening to Pet Shop Boys in the 1980s when you said that. Ross, there are risks associated with the first-time house buy or property investment buy. Surely when they are looking at a property, they don't even know what they're looking for. There's got to be huge risks of someone doing that on their own.
Absolutely. And again, as Bronwen said, education is the way forward. I look at properties every single day of the week, and the things that you find, the ones that you think are the golden opportunities, can sometimes turn into a nightmare. My course, don't want to plug it too much, is all about what to look for in terms of the building, and then really who to speak to, what to do with it. My golden rule: know what you're going to look at, know what you're going to want to do with the property before you look at it. And secondly, whatever you think is the cost, add 20% to it, because I guarantee you the cost will not be the cost at the end. And let's face it, if it's less cost, nobody's going to moan. If it's more cost and you haven't budgeted for it, you can end up in a whole pile of a mess.
Indeed, you can. That's a bit of a worry, isn't it? I could just go back to the questions that we had then. So Julian's asked a question: with 20k cash, what will be the best first project to start with? Teresa, you got a comment to make on that one, or are you commenting?
I seriously feel rejected there, Simon. I feel like it's a backlash from me saying no.
You're not quick enough to put your hand up.
Oh God, right, it's down now. But anyway, I do have something to say. So assuming that you've now invested in the property and you are a landlord, so the biggest risk for a landlord is basically, are you going to get your rent, and is the tenant going to look after your property? And we could also add in there, is there going to be any antisocial behaviour? So to mitigate those risks, you are legally required anyway to provide a decent home with no category 1 hazards in there. But yeah, I would recommend that you basically take a landlord's fundamentals course. Even if you get an agent, I would recommend that anyway, just so that you know exactly what your responsibilities are and how to mitigate those, because generally you can, if you've started the tenancy correctly, i.e. the condition of the property, and you started with the correct reference check-in and so on and so forth, and contracts in place, then you can basically lower your risk on that front.
Very good. And that's much better than no, isn't it?
I thought so.
See what happens when you try.
I've recovered myself.
Okay, we're back over to Slick. Tim.Bishop.
Yeah, it's a very quick point, but actually it's a very general point, and I think it's a very good point Teresa makes about the idea of going on a course, even if you're going to give it to an agent. If you don't know the basics, you can't ask the right questions, and a lot of experts, a lot of you people, will not always tell you what you need to know unless you ask the right questions. So actually getting to know enough about an issue, don't have to be a specialist to be able to ask the right questions, is essential, because a lot of advisors simply are very passive and then only tell you what you need to know if you ask.
Yeah, I have to say, you should replace all of your website photos with this haircut, Tim. It looks brilliant, by the way. I've got to say, it's very sharp, very sharp. Okay, let's move on then. So now we're going to be talking about, before I lost my way with Teresa, I'm about to bypass the question that Julian asked. With 20k cash, what will be the best first project to start with? Well, my objective is to replace my current first-time income of 5k per month within 24 months. I think that's a bit of a steep one. If I was to start now with 20k, could I get 5k per month in 24 months? I'll be struggling, if I'm totally honest. But Bronwen, over to you on that pointer then. Simon, if I can go to you.
Yes, that's a challenge. I think you've got to set yourself goals, but that's a tough one. However, get the knowledge first of all. So you don't have to spend a huge amount on your education, just get that basics. Now with 20,000, depends where you are in the UK. If you're in Hull, you could probably get 2 houses, 3 houses for that. But if you're down in the south where I am in Hampshire, you won't get a garage for that. So you've got to start to just work out where your investing area is going to be, where you can get good value for money, and where you can get a good enough return on investment. Because £5,000 a month, that's quite a few properties, or maybe just quite a few HMOs. The other thing is maybe you could work with other people. So if you run out of money, but you've got the knowledge and you've learned and got that education, you can then work with other people's money and share your knowledge. They bring the money in and you can share the profits. So that's probably where I would start coaching you on, was how do you find investors? How do you find good deals, first of all, but how do you find investors?
Simon?
Else?
Yeah, completely unmortgage related, but yeah, I was going to say hand in hand, education first. Potentially, if you haven't got to the point of working with an investor, probably rent to rent would be the first place maybe to start with a bit of education. You then have some experience to then take on to then demonstrate to an investor second time round, so that you can then scale up to get to that £5,000. 24 months, it can be done without a shadow of a doubt. Wow, I love the way Bronwen looks like she got really small as she walked away from the stand. Oh, that's superb. Sorry, guys, I got really distracted. Yeah, but yeah, I think rent to rent would be a great place to start. You can really kind of, cut your teeth there. Get some education, get some pointers from Teresa, NRLA, etc. You need to get contracts drawn up properly. So you would need to visit someone like Tim and get them drawn up correctly. Do not take something off the internet and just muddle it up. It's definitely going to go wrong. And I think I'm right in saying that, Tim, that if you do that, and it's been written up, it then has the backing of the solicitor's PI insurance.
Basically, if we make a mistake, all solicitors will have at least £2 million worth of insurance, often considerably more. So yeah, if you get a contract drawn up and they make a mistake, you're covered.
So that's why we should never take it off the internet.
Yeah. Also, I did see, it made me smile because I was in a shop. I can't say the shop name. Let's call it eMyths. So eMyths, I went into that shop and there was something for an AST template, and I had a look at it, and I honestly can tell you it was out of date. Wow. So you have to be very careful when you go into shops like eMyths, and then getting those kind of templates that cost you about 12 pence, which is what it's worth. So let's move on. Julie asks, what essential due diligence must I do when I have a joint venture? Talk about joint ventures and partners. Tim, you have so many great answers on this one. I'll come to you first, but then go to Bronwen as well, who must work with joint venture partners all quite a lot.
Well, on our website, we actually have this very thing. It's a joint venture due diligence checklist, because I'm amazed. I would go to courses and people would talk about joint ventures and they said, but you must do your due diligence. But not one person I ever spoke to ever gave any examples of what due diligence were. So it's about a 4-page great long list of all the things you need to find out. So without going through them all now, because otherwise I think we'll probably use at least the next 45 minutes, even at my speed of speaking. It's on our website. And if you want the details, ping me your email, get in contact with me, tim.bishop@bishopslaw.com, and I'll happily send it to you. You can download it. Alternatively, if you find it on the website, download it. Just look up Bishop's Law Due Diligence Joint Venture Checklist. But I think it's very important. I've seen some horror stories where people simply don't check out other people, and there are some simple, factual, step-by-step stages you can and should do.
Just on that, before Bronwen comes in, the checklist that Tim's also mentioned is in part of the due diligence spreadsheet that we all collectively assembled for you. So do go to the video description, download that spreadsheet, because it will contain the link to Tim's website for joint ventures, but also there's a couple of other links that's related to that from the other panel members as well. So do make sure you have a look at that. Bronwen, over to yourself.
Okay, I love joint ventures, but you've got to be very, very, very wary. So a joint venture, I sort of assign it to a little bit like a marriage in a way. You can invest with other people's money as a loan, and that's okay. That's a transaction. You still got to check people out from that point of view as well. But joint venture is where you share the risk. So somebody might put the money in, somebody else might do the build out or whatever, but they're bringing a skill to the party, and you're working together on a contract, on a deal, whatever it might be. Now, everybody who's pulling together deal details says, oh yes, I'm going to make this much money, it's going to be amazing. But as we all say, we're all very cautious. You've always got to add that contingency in. What if this happens? What if that happens? COVID, golly, lots of things do happen. And if it's a joint venture, you're both sharing the losses. Okay, so it isn't something to go into lightly. You definitely need some advice and support, I would suggest. And I coach a lot of people, and there are a number of people, certainly in the last 6 months, where they have had to pull out. One of the parties has pulled out because of numerous reasons, and it's very unfortunate. And marriages, divorce is not what you want to do. You don't want to be there. So if you don't know someone well enough that you can tell them some secrets in your life and have them round for dinner, even stay the night, then you just think maybe it's not for me. So probably a bit too much information on that one.
I was going to say, have them stay over. Where's John in all this conversation? John, listen to Bronwen.
Oh no, he's having showers.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, getting flustered here. Right, moving on. Let's talk about live. So we've got 103 people watching us live right now and asking some great questions. If you are watching this live, please do give us a thumbs up. That'd be greatly appreciated. That hopefully gets you two to share this out more and get a more engaging show. That's all good for us. So please do that. It just shows appreciation, but also it just helps with the algorithm. A couple of people have asked a question on the live shows. BHDC's got two questions. Can essays be used for IHT planning? Essays being service accommodation or furnished holiday lets. Can it be used for IHT purposes? Well, there's been court cases whereby someone said it's a business having a furnished holiday let, and therefore a business can get me business property rollover when I die. Unfortunately, both of those cases that I read have been kicked out of courts, and the persons that own those properties had to pay the IHT. So there's a lot of going around, funny enough, again, on social media groups. I can't say which ones they are, but maybe head something to describe that particular social channel. But I think you have to be very careful what's going on in these forums, because there's a lot of misnomers on there. BHDC also said, can standard limited companies be changed to smart company limited company? So if we talked about smart companies earlier, but if you're in a position whereby your company just needs to be restructured, you can restructure your company to include different share classes. It's not overly difficult, but you just need a good understanding of what you're doing with that. So you can do it retrospectively, but your inheritance tax that you've had to that point, back to my analogy before with the boat, you can't do anything about the water that's in there, but you could plug it in by some structural changes. So hopefully that's giving you some ideas. It's all about tax questions. Guys, you're going to have to be all chopped off here. I mean, Jane Wong has also said, hi, I would like to ask how to have multiple unit tax relief can be applied to a block of flats. So that's an interesting question. So just give you some ideas. If you buy a house, you pay stamp duty land tax. But if you buy a block of flats, which has got 4 units inside of it, then you can do something called an averaging value of those 4 flats. And it hopefully will take your stamp duty land tax down, because the property value of the individual units going down, but there is a 1%. So there is something you can do to minimize stamp duty land tax. There is a number of SDLTs, and funny enough, I've got someone coming on to my tax show. David Hanna is going to be joining me, and that's going to be a hoot, because he's just crazy and crazy fun. So we're all going to be having that show, so we'll be talking about that. So that will be coming out in April, so for more details. But yes, Jane, you can do the multiple dwellings relief. Dr. A&B said purchase options and tax implications of property under corporate ownership. I'm probably not sure about corporate ownership, please. I'll bypass that. But purchase options. Simon, Tim, I know that we had a discussion about purchase lease options. I think that's what that's relating to. Can you just relay your messages and your thoughts about purchase lease options, please?
Well, there's a difference between purchase option and lease option. A purchase option where you simply say you're going to buy a property in the future. A lease option is when you do that and actually you can lease it in the meantime. They're quite different. We don't touch lease options, so we don't advise on those. We do advise on ordinary options. Quite different things, though.
Do you know, I never knew that there was a difference between those two. It just shows you how much of an amateur I am. Simon, what's your thoughts on purchase options? Do you get involved with that? No, I wouldn't have thought so. The mortgages.
Maybe the assumption that Tim's made there, which is it's probably going to be a purchase lease option that they're talking about and they've heard about, but they've maybe abbreviated it incorrectly. Can be a great way to control property, particularly we talked about rent to rent as a good way to maybe get started in property. Purchase lease option is a bit of a step on from that, where You might run it as a rent to rent, but the idea is you're going to buy the property eventually, which is something Bronwen does on a number of her properties in her portfolio, to be fair. And it means you can control quite a large asset for a relatively small amount of money at the outset, potentially carry out a little bit of alteration to the property so that it then generates greater income. It can be a fabulous way, because if you didn't add value, you then haven't lost that value, because you now have the opportunity to buy the property at its enhanced value. And with some lenders, you can use that enhancement in value as part of the deposit for the purchase price. So let's say it's worth 300. Yeah, you've got a purchase lease option at 300. You've spent 50. It's now worth 400. Potentially, you can get a loan of 300 to buy it.
Yeah, I love purchase lease options. I wrote a blog recently on just this subject because the market has gone crazy, hasn't it, in the last couple of years? So property prices are really high. And so, if somebody's got a price on that's crazy and you think it's not really worth that, but the owner maybe doesn't live there, maybe they don't need the money now, maybe there's no mortgage on that property. So what are they going to do with the funds? And people just assume, well, they've got it on the market, they must need the money. And that's not always the case. So if you sort of find out some of those little snippets, if they're, would they be happy to rent it to you for a period of, say, 3 to 5 years? Will they get a return on their money today, but you agree maybe to pay that price that they want today in 3 to 5 years? Would they consider it? I've certainly done this a couple of times, and it's worked really, really well. And I'm happy to share my knowledge.
Tim?
Well, you're on mute, Tim.
The wife's at him again, you see. The wife's at him.
Got it. I'm back again. Right. In case it wasn't clear from what I said earlier, obviously Bronwen and Simon have dealt with lease options. Purchase options are quite different. They're usually used, not always, but usually used when planning permission is involved. So, for example, you might get an option on someone's back garden and you might pay them 10 grand for an option with the ability to buy it for 200 grand if you get planning permission, which makes it worth 400 grand, something like that. So it tends to be not always, but often planning permission. If you think there's a possibility of getting planning permission, but you don't want to take on the property with the risk of not getting planning permission, but you simply pay someone an option, a cash sum, to buy it at a later date.
Ross, I want to bring you onto this conversation because you've got some experience, but there's something that's connected to this. And Gunnars has beautifully timed this question right. Gunnars has said, I'm just going to a development with a JV partner, previously done BRR and numbers. Do I need for what numbers do I need for developments? And I remember a couple of shows back, you talked about the numbers putting in contingency, but obviously Tim's mentioned about planning permission as well. Just give us an overview. Anyone that's going to property development, what should they look out for? What numbers should they be running through?
Okay, so it's a classic. First of all, out in the marketplace, people will quote you price per square metre, whether that's for refurb or whether that's for new developments. Don't trust it. Every construction project is unique. It's not like building cars or building anything else. You're building a unique product. Therefore, the price is unique. And that difference could be the ground could be contaminated, right through to the way the building's going to be put up, whereabouts in the country it is, how busy builders are, price of materials at the time. We know materials are at an all-time high at the moment. So there's a whole number of factors that come into it. Drainage would be one. Out of the ground is probably the biggest risk in most construction projects, is coming out the ground. In terms of JV partners, do your due diligence. We spoke about it earlier, but do your due diligence on the actual builder if you're going to JV with them, and look at financials, look at corporation tax payments, look at everything that you could possibly look at to make sure they are financially secure, because 9 times out of 10, you'll put a lot of trust in the builder, who is a JV partner with you. If he disappears midway through, you're left holding the baby. And we've seen it a load of times. If you've borrowed the funds, they still want their money back. And that costs you more and more. So my 20% then becomes even more. But generally for me, I said it earlier, 20%, whatever you think the cost is going to be, add 20% to it.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you ever so much. Going over to Balbear, who's asked a question. I'll go back to the pre-programmed questions in a second. But Balbear's asked what question, and I have to be honest, I feel like I'm on the Da Vinci Code here with you, Balbear, if you don't mind me saying. What is the property training code for buy-to-let properties under personal names, and will it go under the expenses? That is a great question. I have no idea. You're going to have to check out your zero codes and your QuickBooks for that one, I'm afraid. But good luck. Ping us a message with what code you used. That'd be really interesting. But Belbo has continued, so hopefully we've got a different question. So we was buying buy-to-let property, paid mortgage broker and solicitor fees. Unfortunately, the deal fell through, which is not great. And we all seen that, obviously, what Tim has mentioned. Before the change of contract, is there any way if the money spent can be claimed back? But unfortunately, it can't be claimed back from a solicitor or mortgage broker, one I thought. And the costs of abortive fees, which is what the HMRC call them, means that you can't get those costs either in personal names. But in a limited company, weirdly, you can have abortive fees deducted. So if there's another good reason to use a limited company, there you are. Abortive fees can be allowed in a limited company. I'm just going to go back into the main questions because there's quite a few here I want to get through. Guy has asked a question, with an AST, how frequently should we inspect a property? What notice period do I need to give? Teresa, I'm going to give you the blue pill or the red pill. The blue pill is just where you say no, and the red pill is where you give some good details. Which one are you going to go for?
Red.
Perfect. There you go.
Right answer.
So,
oh, that's the end of it. Let's move on. Next question.
Sorry, go on. Remind me, what's the question?
The question.
It took all my energy to decide which pill to choose. I just didn't get the question.
It's not the mint with the hole. It's with an AST, how frequently should we inspect the property, and what notice period do I have to give?
Righty-ho. Yes. So the NRLA do have a clause in the AST contract that you can use, and basically it just features in there that the landlord is able to access a property given sufficient notice. So generally that is, well, by law it's 48 hours notice that you need to give the tenant. Now then, the frequency of inspections is really up to the landlord. I mean, I personally, within a very short period of time of a tenant starting a tenancy, I will visit the property just to find out how they're getting on and to nip any sort of like behavioural issues in the bud, like drying clothes inside and all the windows shut, that type of thing. Obviously, you can just make this like a maintenance visit and a welcome visit, perhaps. I mean, some landlords just basically will visit a property twice a year, but it really depends. If you were a bit nervous about the tenant, perhaps every 3 months you would go in. But I would say twice a year is probably sufficient. And obviously, letting the tenant know in advance. I mean, the minimum's 48 hours, but it's probably better to give more notice than that. Or you know, if you don't want to personally go into the property, maybe you could conduct a virtual viewing. They seem to be all the rage at the moment. So you can get the tenant to walk around the property with you and just check the condition of the property. There
has been a court case, Tim, I'm not sure if you've seen this, whereby a student has sued their landlord because the advertisement was very nice, but when the person got to the property, it was a bit of a tip by the side of things. Did you come across that one for virtual inspections?
I'm not sure I've got the right colour, but I think I'm going to take the red pill on this one.
That's the right colour. Is that the detail one? You're going to give detail?
Yes, the detail one.
Down.
Blue pill, blue.
Back on, too late now.
I haven't got a clue. Sorry, blue pill.
All right, fair enough. But the court case I saw was the student is suing the owner of the property because it's a construction site. But on the virtual tour, it was actually very good. So be careful with anyone looking at the properties on a virtual tour. But equally, if you're a landlord, don't advertise your property to be something it's not, because you're only going to upset them, and you're going to upset the your own profitability, because you can have voids and all sorts of issues going on there. Ross, what's your views on that one?
Just a quick one. My maintenance team go into lots of houses. We probably know those houses better than the landlords. Talk to your maintenance team. You know, they're a minefield of information. They're in those properties. If there's problems, if there's issues, they'll be the ones to know.
Okay, Perfect. For those who have been so kind enough to give me a thumbs up on the message, on the message box, it wasn't that one I was on about, but that, bless you, that's wonderful that you've gone up to that artistry ability. It's more to do with the thumbs up that's already there on the video. So if you could press that button that's already there, that would be fantastic if you don't mind me doing that. But very good artistic skills, I have to say. David has asked a question. I keep hearing that you can borrow money from pension funds. What does this mean and how can I learn more? Now, I'm not a pension specialist at all, and I don't think it's the right area to do this kind of show. So if you have got a pensions and you want to take money out of your pension, then speak to your pension fund administrator or your advisor. Okay, because it's regulated, it's not something that we can talk about, and we don't have a pension specialist on the show, so we have to bypass that one, I'm afraid.
Speakers, we might get some guest speakers in later this year, so pensions person may well be invited. Yes,
absolutely. Guy is, so I've just gone on to that one. What am I doing? Okay, so Bronwen, what's this? It says Chris asks, Bronwen spends a lot of time away. What's going on here then, Bronwen? Is this what systems and technology to help?
JD partners.
Too much familiarity going on to this question, if you don't mind me saying.
Technology.
Spends a lot of time away. What systems and technology help make that possible? What systems do the panel use to make their lives easy and efficient? To be fair, my mum with a Hoover, that works very well. But apart from that, Bronwen, what systems do you use?
Oh my goodness, I think these are people that want to meet with me face to face, and I'm like, oh, actually I'm not in the UK at the moment. And if people know, I was in Africa last year during COVID, but I still work. So obviously I use this thing called the laptop. That's technology when it's working. No, I mean, seriously, property, if you're seriously going to property and building a portfolio, then I wouldn't manage any of my properties because I wouldn't have the time. So in terms of systems, make sure you've got good people on the ground and that you communicate with them regularly. So I might not be able to meet with them, but I can talk to them. So systems like bookkeeping, get really good bookkeeper, use Xero or equivalent systems software for bookkeeping. We use something called Asana. It's a task. It's a bit like Trello, if anyone's using that. So we keep track of various different strategies, different properties, different people. And, we have people manage our guest houses, for example. Now that takes a lot of day-to-day stuff of communication. So rather than email now, we use Asana, because Asana, you can create a task. Within that task, you can have attachments that you can assign that task to somebody and you don't lose it like you lose an email. So Asana is really good. Something like LastPass, where you can keep all your passwords secure and accessible, and you can give them secure access to certain people. That's been a complete, godsend to us in the last few years. What else? I don't know. Anyone else here use other systems for their managing their properties or service departments and that sort of thing?
Yeah, they use me.
Yes. It's called Messenger. Ross? Yeah. Well, if you've got HMOs and things, you can have all sorts of apps and things around heating systems and things for your tenants to communicate with you. So yeah, there's probably more people. Teresa's got some ideas, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the NRLA do have a platform in the cloud called Landlord Vision. So yes, you can put all your properties on there with all the things that need to be done, and you keep track of all your documentation, which is obviously good if you've got to give evidence for anything or submit to the tax man.
Well, we use Guesty as well, which is for anyone who's doing service accommodation platforms or furnished holiday lets. Guesty is a brilliant thing because it communicates with Airbnb, TripAdvisor, etc. But you can set up systems and automatic text messages to your people coming into the property, use key safes and so on like that. So Guesty is a really very fluid platform, which I love using to prefer. But great questions about that indeed. Moving on to the next question then, guys. Tara's asked, with holiday lets, would you use commercial gas electricity supply, or would this be standard domestic supply? It's not really a business as far as I know. I mean, with holiday lets, it is a trade business, but it's also not residential. So it's a good question. I mean, typically I would say if you say to an electricity utility provider that I'm using a holiday let, they will charge you at 20% standard rate, VAT wise, we're talking about here, by the way, versus the 5%, which is residential elements. So if you say to your utility companies, I'm using this for trade purposes as a holiday let, they will charge you 20% on VAT. So just bear that in mind as you're going through that. To be honest, I've never had that much of an issue. Don't know anyone else who's come across that before.
Yeah, so commercial rates tend to be cheaper than residential rates. So I've got a broker that sort of consolidates everything for me. I've got their details if you want to share that.
Yeah, put that on the chat box. I'll share that out.
Yeah, will do. I mean, what they do is they help me get the fixed rates so that I fix the rates at the best possible that I can, but also make sure that the providers are not likely to go bust given the current circumstances. You know, these are going to be solid contracts. So, you know, I think by devolving that, the way that I do it is it takes the pressure off. I'm using an expert. They don't even charge me because they get commission from the various providers. So for me, I know when my fixed rate's going to come up for renewal because they tell me. I don't have to worry about it. They then say to me, look, there's this fixed rate and there's that fixed rate. We recommend this one, but it's up to you. And then they tick the box and then they diarise. And if I've got a problem with meter readings, for example, they'll sort it out with the provider for me. So what, you know, commercial rates definitely as a professional sort of landlord, I'm using commercial rates on all my properties now, and you know they're sorting it out for me. So I will share their details. In fact, they wrote to me only this morning saying because of the utility hike. I did get it up actually. Let's have a look. Should I just quote this? You've probably seen in the media over the past couple of months that there's an ongoing energy crisis. And we're experiencing the worst prices the energy industry has ever seen. Since January 21, prices have risen 400% and have soared, etc. So due to this, we're advising our customers to lock in new rates as soon as possible to avoid any further price increases, which we did previously for you with electricity. So they've done that for me already. Now they're saying to me with gas, let's do it. Let's do it quickly. So again, you know, I do recommend if you've got lots of properties, this is probably worth your while having a conversation with Lucy at REC Group, and I'll put their details in the chat box for you, Simon. Okay?
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll share that straight up. Teresa, just on that point about utilities, I heard that Rishi Sunak was talking about helping tenants with the utility bills because of this crisis. Has the NRLA heard anything more from Rishi Sunak's statements?
No, I know they gave a pot of money to help tenants who were in rent arrears because of the pandemic. So they did dish out 65 million there.
Right.
But I wasn't aware about that with the utility bill.
Okay. Moving on then. So this is going to be a good question for you here, Ross. Brian has asked, I'm wanting to put in a mini kitchen into some of my HMO rooms. What size units and what things do I need to consider? Over to you on that, and then after that I'll come back to Teresa and Tim because I think there's some risks and issues in regards to having kitchenettes in bedrooms, but we'll come on to that.
Okay, so first things first, electricity supply, water supply, drainage supply into the room. Secondly, we know from experience, don't use the little belling units because when the microwave goes or the fridge goes, you've got a very expensive microwave or fridge to replace because you throw the unit away and buy a new one. Bronwen's nodding happily because I must have built hundreds of mini kitchens for her. We use a 2-ring hob. We put a microwave in, a little fridge, all freestanding, a base unit and a bit of worktop with a sink in it. You can squeeze those down. Just be careful of electrical regs. You don't want your sockets, your switches too close. Yeah, I mean, just remember water drainage, and probably drainage is the most difficult one because it's always got to run downhill. You can't have drainage running uphill. And I would certainly never recommend anybody uses a sunny flow in a rented accommodation. if you don't know what a sani flow is, it's a macerator. It changes, you can put it pretty much anywhere and it pumps the waste away, but then renowned for blocking up.
Simon.
Yeah, I thought I'd add in, almost certainly, unless you've been extremely lucky in the mortgage provider that you picked at the outset, the current lender will not allow you or not be comfortable with the fact that you've now turned what is a standard bedroom into a mini studio or mini flat. Yes, you'll probably need a new mortgage at the same time.
There you go. And also, I think the one of the things that I've seen recently is, especially in Nottingham, which they are saying now, if you've got a kitchenette, it certainly will be individualised local authority rates.
Yeah, indeed.
So you have to be very careful with that. I've got a question from Keith, and I'm not going to go into much detail with you on Keith. So thanks for putting your question in. But you mentioned about developing a property from a flat into 4-bedroom units, and talk about planning considerations. To be honest, with the level of detail you've gone into, I do think that you probably need individual consultations to talk about your project. That's not something that generically, I don't think that this show could really do its justice without taking half an hour to go through that. So, and the reason why I also mentioned this question is because I know that Tim, throughout this show, is delivered some great content already about doing your utilities, which you've asked a question about drainage. So make sure you pick up with Ross separately about that, if that's okay. Trevor's asked a question. I'm working with a property owner to enable him to sell his property on with planning permission. There's a lot of questions about planning permission I've just noticed. My incentive being a share of the uplift in value. How should I structure this to be most tax efficient? We have currently agreed heads of terms to a promotional event agreement. This is an interesting one. I'm not sure if you've had this much, Tim, whereby someone comes along and says, well, I've got a property. It's got currently £200,000, but then someone else comes along and said, well, actually, I can get you planning permission, and I think we could sell it for 300,000, which is 100,000 more. I want £30,000 out of it, and you take the rest. Any legal issues with regards to that, first of all, Tim, from someone saying I will take an uplift in the value of the property?
I don't think so. To be honest, I'm not sure it's something we've come across that much. Again, I'm not actually a conveyancer, so I wouldn't necessarily have seen this. But I don't think there's nothing that's illegal about it in any way. It's merely a question of how you actually get the contract properly organised. There's no reason why you couldn't get a percentage of an uplift.
I mean, from a tax perspective, the classic here is someone will say, well, can I claim capital gains tax rates? And the answer would be no. Because simply all you're doing is saying, well, actually, I'm charging you for the uplift in value to the person who owns the property. It's not your asset. So therefore, you've got a consultancy charge. And we've seen a couple of clients who are racking out invoices to the tune of £200,000 doing this kind of thing. And Mr. VAT are very interested in you because you're providing a service. And then anything over 85,000 becomes VATable. And if you don't pay the VAT to HMRC, that could be imprisonment. So you have to be very careful with how you structure these things. But get some tax advice is basically what I would say to that, and get a good commercial lawyer if you haven't done so as well. Scott asked a question. I have a landlord insurance policy for a small portfolio, direct line. As I migrate my portfolio from sole ownership to a limited company structure. My landlord insurance policy is still valid, or do I need to make any changes on that? We don't have anyone who deals with insurance, unfortunately, on this panel, but I can only imagine, unless the panel members say otherwise, that if you've got an insurance policy on you, then once the properties go to a limited company, surely it has to be changed because a limited company is a separate entity from you anyway.
Yeah, you need to change the name on the policy. That's the important thing, I think. I did check with my broker, Ian Gardner. He said, let me just answer. Sorry, where is it? Here it is. 1 second. Okay. Scott asks that. Oh, now I can't find it. So.
Well, shall we come back to you? Because I've got a question I can interject. Yeah, don't worry. But something about a question for Ross here. But have you got it there, Bronwen?
Okay, a change of legal entity shouldn't be a major issue. but the title on the policy should be amended from the individual name into the limited company name. The only other potential impact that they could have is there may be a legal requirement to add employer's liability to the cover if the limited company will have more than one director and or split shareholding. Okay, happy to share my broker's details if you want to communicate with him further. He's really good.
Wow, that's interesting about the shareholder. That is really interesting about the shareholder structure. Okay, so let's move on to Laura's last question. Is a tenant is complaining of mold around windows in a modern flat. I've advised more ventilation is needed. What else can I do to prevent this? Ross, apart from telling them to open a window now and again, what else can they do?
Well, I mean, the only way to avoid mold is ventilation. Depending on what sort of house it is, HMOs, etc., stick an extractor fan in there. You need to be able to work out the duty of that extractor fan, and 9 times out of 10, people don't have the right extractor fan for the room. Other simple things, if there's vents on the windows, make sure they're open, they're kept open, which is another common one. I mean, it is purely ventilation, and from a stupid landlord's point of view, tell them not to put their clothes on the radiator to dry, because that's the classic, you're putting moisture into the air.
Lou, take those clothes off that radiator.
Yeah, well, if you've ever had an HMO, it's probably the most common thing they do is dry their clothes in the room. Also, if there's tumble dryers or en suites, make sure the fans are sized correctly, make sure they're working. And I always put in humidistat fans, that will automatically fire up if the room becomes too damp or there's a moisture element in it.
Good point. Teresa?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, it's important to find out, what is causing that damp issue. As Ross was saying, if they are putting washing on the radiators, that obviously you want to nip that in the bud. That's why when you start a tenancy, it's good to go in the early stages to find out, what is going on in the property, because if there is a problem with the fabric of the building, obviously that'll have to be addressed. But if it's purely because of them, and the tenant will generally look for the landlord to solve the problem, and it could just be a friendly meeting where you just basically find out what they're doing to cause that issue and get them to stop it. And if you can't, then as Ross says, and you would just get really good ventilation in on humidistat, so it just turns on as and when the moisture rises. But yes, it is. Damp and mold, that is a within the housing health and safety rating system, it is a hazard, and a landlord is duly responsible to reduce hazards in the property. But, yeah.
Simon, it's really interesting, because I bet if you asked everybody on this call tonight if they've got mold or damp in their own property, the one that they're living in, they probably wouldn't have. It's always in rented properties. They seem to treat them in a different way for some reason, and it's always, not always, 90% of the time is down to user.
Yeah. Interesting.
And again, if you can't get into the property because you live a distance away from it, you could do a virtual, walk around just to find out where the mold is and what's going on.
Good points. Just going to go into a question. Kirsty's asked about the use of limited companies, and there's quite a lot of content there, but I'm going to just disseminate that. So I'm saying I'm not a high rate taxpayer now, but might be in the future. Should I use a buy-to-let limited company? And my argument is, and speaking to Simon of recent times, is really changed my view on a number of factors. That a limited company, you can create, whether you call it a FIC, family investment company, or a smart company, or whatever the marketing terms are out there, it's still a company. But ultimately, these limited companies can be used in a tax efficient way to pay for parents, children. It can be used to have medical bills. It could help you reduce a number of taxation issues. If you think about going abroad as well, international tax compliance, there's some huge significant things there. And Simon, just on the, so should you use a limited company? I'm swaying more towards you should use a limited company. But I think there's some maybe conflict with Simon Hodgson's about getting mortgages. But as far as I know, Simon, the mortgage interest rates on someone using company isn't too dissimilar anyway to individuals purchasing properties in their own name.
No, the main differences lie if you're very early on in your journey, or you're looking to create a strategy that is really hands-off, single let properties, then it is possible to get lower interest rates. But if you're doing anything that is HMO, serviced accommodation, holiday let, multi-unit block of flats, the interest rates are very broadly quite similar, within 0.25% of each other, which wouldn't necessarily change the strategy. It's only if you're doing single lets, then it becomes different. But of course, that's a completely different investment game. You're not really going to create an income that is sort of retirable in any way, shape or form quickly. You're going to need to mass purchase in order to make that.
Simon, just a couple of questions on that. There's a couple of questions I want to fire up from previous people or live. So if you are live, thank you ever so much, and do fire your questions and we'll try and get to them. Time's always good to be running out on this kind of show, but I will try and do my best. BHDC said, what is the name of the 5-year fixed term that was mentioned earlier? Are the names to these things, or is it just fixed term?
I didn't mention a specific lender. I was relating to a particular type of strategy, which some lenders will allow you to do a further advance, which is effectively a mini remortgage mid-term to borrow additional money if the property's grown in value. Some lenders won't allow you to do that. And the idea is, if you're going to take a 5-year fixed, try and compare or get a lender that will give you the ability to do the further advance rather than not. As long as the rates are broadly similar, you've not penalised yourself, but you've kept open that ability to then unlock an increase in equity as it happens. So the end, you're not having to do remortgages every 2 years, which is counterintuitive to a lot of brokers. A lot of brokers will like you to take 2-year products because the whole idea is that they build up a bank of clients that then need remortgages every 2 years, and they just add a few clients every year each on, and they have grown a business. I don't particularly take or align to that it's about the best practice for you. And if I provide you with great service and great advice, hopefully you go and tell people that that's how we grow a business, particularly.
One other question before I go into any other questions is, what's the best way to get a mortgage that's in a trust? Can you get mortgages in a trust?
You can. There are very different types of trusts, aren't there? There's a bare trust. There's all sorts of different types of trusts. So we really need to know how the trust is structured, how it was set up, where the monies came from. Yes, one of those questions you just can't answer off the bat. Yes, it is possible to do. It's a little more involved, to be fair.
Fair enough. Some people have been asking about SAS pensions, and I will state right here, right now, is that the SAS pension setup, I know we spoke about them briefly on this show, but as Bronwen said, we will get an expert to talk about SAS pensions, and maybe we can go into town on that. But I'm purposely staying away from that side, if that's all right, guys. Ginny's asked a question: what is the increase in energy bills? How does a HMO landlord mitigate this? Bronwen, obviously you've got HMOs. Ross, you know how to do properties that are properly insulated, keep the heat in, etc. So Bronwen, why don't we start with you first?
Yeah, I mean, it's trying to be as efficient as possible. It's having systems again so that you can monitor the temperature of the place. I know some people are very sort of detailed at doing that. We're not particularly. We just make sure that we've got radiators that you can adjust, and good windows, good boilers, so you're as efficient as you can be. And then with energy bill rises, sometimes you're going to have to increase the rent, unfortunately. In an HMO, just maybe a little bit on each of the rooms can help support that increased cost. But I think that's pretty inevitable, actually. Any other thoughts?
Ross?
Yeah, a lot of people, when they set up an HMO, they don't really look at these things until it bites them, which is what we're seeing now. Good insulation. If you're going to use wall insulation, be very careful on what you're putting in your walls. I say every time we're on this call, because the wrong insulation can cause you a lot of problems. We've already mentioned high efficiency boilers. Generally, I think you've just got to be sensible, and controls. Make sure you've got the right controls on your boiler. I use hives because I like them. I can see what's going on with the heating. You can restrict the access to the users, because I've had tenants that will put the heating on all day long, 24/7, 7 days, 365 days of the year, and it will be on 25. And believe me, it happens. They don't care because they're not paying. So again, get some controls on there. Fairly easy, fairly cheap to set up, but could save you quite a lot of money, especially in this marketplace. Just to add, I wouldn't rush off down the air source heat pump and all the other things that they're coming up with. There was a question on EPCs and on energy usage. Most of the electricity in this country is still generated by fossil fuels, so it doesn't really encourage, or it doesn't give you any lower an EPC rating should you start putting electric heaters in or start going down an air source heat pump at the moment.
No, fair enough. Teresa, you got your hand up.
Yes. I was just going to basically add, because the government are focused on this whole net carbon, or is it zero carbon initiative? So they're focusing in on the rental sector, where they're looking to raise EPC levels to a C for new tenancies from 2025. So as Ross said, look at your EPC, and generally it has on there suggestions on how to raise the energy efficiency of the property. So you might be able to adopt some suggestions there. There is some funding out there. So if you did have a HMO with tenants on benefits, for example, and your property is rated E, F, or G, there is funding for that type of property out there. So that's via the local authority, delivery schemes, or via the eco funding, which is through the big energy suppliers. So you might be able to tap into that. And then I was going to say, have the landlords considered putting in a fair usage? I don't know if anybody on the panel uses a fair usage clause, where if the tenant uses beyond that, then you could charge. You can't make any profit out of your tenant. It literally has to be at cost, but you can pass on that to the tenant.
I'm going to move on, panel members, if it's all right. I think you're absolutely right with all these things that are coming on here. A related question from Fraser is actually saying, in certain councils, there is an increase in council tax for HMO rooms and ensuites, which is Nottingham City Council for sure. How does a HMO landlord cope with this change? Do you transfer the cost of increased council tax to the tenants? Well, ultimately, council tax normally is a tenant's cost, but you will have your tenants kicking off if you've quoted a room without council tax. Bronwen, do you have any issues like that in your local authority?
Not particularly, not yet, but we're always keeping an eye out and talking to other landlords to check what's going on, really. So no, not particularly.
Mrs. Red Pill, you're on it tonight. Come on then, let's have the details.
Well, my understanding is that council, if it's a HMO, it's the landlord who's responsible for the council tax. But yeah, it's always about the margin, isn't it? If you can pass on a cost to your tenant, but will it withstand like the market rent? They might be able to get something cheaper down the road. So yeah.
Nice. Okay, perfect. Just going on, because we've got 10 minutes to go, and I know that someone's asked a question here. So Chris has asked a question. In fact, Daniel's asked a question. Let's go to Daniel first on YouTube Live. Commercial property service charges. Must the service charge income be held in a client bank account? And if not fully spent, should it be repaid to the tenant? My understanding from that point, Tim, I don't think it should be repaid, should it? If someone's paying for service charges?
I don't think so. I suppose it depends. No, I don't think so. Although I would need to check with one of my guys on that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much you have to negotiate these kind of fees. You do have to show a statement of account, and I think money needs to be. I remember working for a housing association. We had to keep a running total, and that the fact that monies weren't spent, that it was all in a holding account for review, but it didn't reflect that you had to refund it. Moving on to Chris, who's been trying to get his question, apparently asking how you ask a question. I think you've worked it out now, Chris, so good evening to you, sir. It's saying, I have a 2-bed leasehold flat in Aldershot, 83 years left. What is the best way financially to extend the lease to 99? Now, they've put here 99,100. I guess what you meant there is 99-125. But it's come across as 99,125 years, which would be extortionately a long time. direct communication with the landlord or social media lease extension companies? Tim, just demystify that. If someone wants to extend a lease, what do they need to do?
Okay, there are two options. And firstly, if you're approaching 80 years, don't hang around too long, because the second it goes below 80 years, the price will go up a lot. But the beauty is, if you get a formal lease extension application in before it drops below 80 years, the term will freezes for a period. So broadly, you've got two choices. Yes, you can negotiate directly with your freeholder, or secondly, you can put in a formal application. We normally recommend the formal route. It's a bit slower and it's a bit more expensive in terms of the legal costs, but the big difference is you have complete control. The freeholder can't refuse. You have to get an extra 90 years and your ground rent goes down to zero. On the other hand, if you negotiate with your freeholder, you may have a very decent, very kind, very nice freeholder. They're out there, but some aren't. And they can mess you around and they can change the terms at any stage, and there's nothing at all you can do with them. And the worst of all would be for you, would be to start negotiating it, to drag on, and the freeholder suddenly say, no, I'm not going to do it. And by that stage, it's dropped below 80 years. Believe you, we've seen it. So in that situation, I would say don't hang around. You've got another couple of years to do it. The other thing with lease extensions is, although there may be some changes to what the government are planning, that's mainly for new leases, and it's far from clear what they're going to do. But the big thing is, of course, with the lease, if the market value of your property is going up and the lease is going down, you haven't just got one hit on it, you've got two, because the more expensive your flat, the more expensive your lease extension will be, and the shorter the term, the more expensive your lease extension will be. So it's going to get more expensive, and definitely do it before 80 years. We advise, we have a team of 5 doing nothing but this, possibly the biggest, most specialist team in the country, and we're always happy to give free advice on the phone. So get in contact with us, ask for a lease extension team, and we'll answer all your questions, no strings attached.
Perfect. I'm going to go probably for one more question, and then we're going to have to stop, I'm afraid, guys, because it's already 26 minutes past. Would you believe it? And we've probably answered good 20 questions because we have shortened down the introductions, but still you guys have got lots of questions. And we could be here all night. And to be fair, we're not going to be. So let's go to one question that was on here. Tired Gunnosaurus. Now that's a great username, isn't it, for YouTube? Tired Gunnosaurus. I don't know what kind of pictures I've got on there, but they've got a little icon as well. So go check out that, anyone who is on YouTube, because it looks pretty cool, I've got to say. But Tired Gunnosaurus has asked, if a rental property is in a trust and rental income is going to that trust, what are the taxes? And back to Simon's question, point earlier, sorry, that trust is very complex. So a bare trust, the income and taxes go to the individual who's a beneficiary. A discretionary trust is a highly taxed charge. An interest in possession, well, it depends on what the trust says. So it's not a simple answer with that. So if you have got a trust in place, read the documentation, because it's got to be in there, and speak to your trustees as much as possible. This is my last question, because this is, we need to be fair, and people that have registered should have their questions answered first. So this has come from Adam. I'm trying to get into property investing. I actually went through a remortgage application recently to release £20,000 in order to pay off credit card loan debt. I'll be getting these funds in May. What would you do in my situation? A, pay off the debt, or B, put the £20,000 into a property investment? My view, panel members, I'm going to leave the questions for tonight on that one, but I would always pay off the debt, because credit card debt especially would be typically might be 13, 17, 20, 30%. But your loans that you made from banks may be as small as 6 or 8%. So that you have to then take a punt on whether you get better returns on investments from your properties. But that's just my view. Bronwen and then Simon, what's your views on those points?
Yeah, I mean, if you're clever, you can get the zero interest on credit cards, and you'll have to watch that very, very carefully, because if you go over that by just a day, you're going to be hammered. So you've got to know how to manage it. So if it is zero and you can get it for 3 years or something crazy, I do know this person because I asked them some more questions. I know they've got a good credit rating. They can get mortgages. They own their own property. So, I would just go, well, if there's no other funds anywhere else, and that will get you a buy-to-let property, you could manage it. But, you have to be really careful, because you need a cash buffer. I've got 5 golden rules, and that's one of them, all in my book. Okay, anyone else?
I suppose the other thing would be to just double check again. This is just a generalized point, not advice. Potentially the broker that has put that application in has put down that you are going to be using the proceeds of the remortgage to pay down your credit cards. Now, depending on which lender you've gone to, they might actually follow that through and check it up. Okay, so just be careful, because if you say you're going to do something, sometimes you need to follow it through. If you've made the broker aware that you were potentially looking for a bit of flexibility, then potentially they could have chosen a lender that would perhaps not follow up as robustly, I think is how we'll call it.
Okay, very good. And I think that pretty much brings our show to a close, apart from Tim's now come in. So Tim, what would you like to add?
I was merely going to add what Simon was sort of saying. If you tell your solicitor you actually borrowed money and it's borrowed money you're putting down, you may have major problems with mortgage companies, but your solicitor will have to pass on whatever you tell them. So the solicitor will say, where did the funds come from? You say, actually, I've borrowed them. You may have major problems.
Perfect. Okay. Bronwen, would you like to summarise tonight's show?
Yes, wow. So just to thank everybody for all their amazing questions. I'm really sorry we couldn't get through them all, but we do try and do them in order. So if you can get your questions in really early, we'll try and pick up the ones we've missed, but also you've emailed me. So some of the ones I might distribute if they need urgent responses. So I'll try and do that, but I can't promise it. So yeah, big thank you to Simon for being our fantastic host. We had a bit of a laugh there. I wrote a sweep on how many you're on mutes we said today, and it was only 5 actually. It's not too bad. John thought it would be 8 and I thought it would be 4, so I win.
Not competitive at all.
Next time the 6 of us will compete. But yeah, thank you for being an amazing host. Thank you all of the panel for your contribution. I think the great thing about this group is that we're all investors too. So we know the pains, we know how investing really works apart from our own individual specialties. So I'm going to leave you with my book, Building Your Dream Life. Lots of case studies in there. If you want to know a bit more about any of the stuff we've talked about, do contact me. I'm more than happy to share. And if you want to do some more learning, that's what I'm there for. So yeah, next meeting will be the 7th again, the 7th of March. Spooky, isn't it? 777. So yeah, until then, I just want to say thank you to everybody and we'll see you in March. Take care. Bye.
Good night.